Welcome to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. Super excited to be back with you. Thank you so much for being here with Michael Regan and myself, Kathryn Peterson. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about finding an accountability partner, which is so important, and talk about someone who knows a ton about this topic. Michael, that's kind of like his job. So being not only my accountability partner, but a lot of other people's. So really kind of when I'm thinking about accountability, I'm a nerd. So I did look up kind of what is the actual definition, because I think people look at this a little differently. So what I pulled up is the obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions. But really, for you, what do you mean when we use the word accountability? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that actually great technical definition. What's your source on this one, Kathryn? Do we go
the
to
dictionary.
Okay,
The
fair enough.
dictionary.
Dictionary.com.
Yes.
When I think of accountability, I really look at it through a practical lens rather than a technical lens. And sometimes it's easiest to describe what it is by clarifying what it's not. I once had a pastor who said, we really need to stop shooting all over each other. And I thought, boy, isn't that the truth? Accountability is not a bunch of me imputing on you what you should and shouldn't do. It's me helping you as a partner get clear on what you really want, why you really want it, and what commitment you're going to make to take action on it. And once we get clear on that commitment, I think accountability then is an appropriate response. Great, it sounds like you're going to do that. And by this time, can I check back with you on that? Can I be your accountability partner? And I think at its most practical sense, Kathryn, that's a more natural version. Anytime I see people turn it into expectations that the partner himself or herself creates, it gets wonky. It gets inappropriate. It gets imbalanced. So yeah, I think for me, I like when we meet at a level of your commitment and my willingness to follow up on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things that I think of too is why it's important to find an accountability partner versus being accountable to yourself. And those are, I think, two different things. Just to bring up quickly is you of course have to have your self accountability, but we all know that that only goes so far. And I think that's why it's important to pick up an accountability partner, because I think that really elevates that level. And I think sometimes people falsely think, oh, I'll just hold myself accountable, but you can only do that to a point. And so any thoughts on that, or any thoughts on why we aren't as good by ourselves?
Yeah. So your setup is probably going to be received as accurate by most people, meaning I think most people would say, yeah, that's true. There are a lot of things I think I can hold myself accountable to, but I really need help. I guess the thing I'd try to create some definition on is, as you look back, and maybe just say over the last year, it's really hard to look back too far. Are there areas in your life where you've been able to hold yourself accountable and you'd say, yeah, I actually can do that. I can make a personal commitment and hold myself accountable. Does anything come to mind that you feel like, yeah, I was pretty successful holding myself accountable?
I think for me, working out a few times a week, I'm really good at, because I know it makes me feel better. But doing the strength training in addition to that, that was tough, because that's the part I didn't want to do and I needed an accountability partner for.
Okay, so that's really funny because we both went to a similar example. I'm a very active person, so I don't necessarily need an accountability partner to stay active. I am biking, hiking, playing pickleball, playing golf, working out. When I'm up in Oregon, I'm kayaking. I don't need accountability to that, but strength training, I had to hire a coach. I had to hire a trainer. And when I did, that accountability to a set time with a person waiting for me who already had designed the routine for that day based on where we left off and my long-term goals, super helpful. And I have to tell you, some people resist it because they think, oh, I don't want to pay for a coach. I don't want to pay for a trainer. I have to relate to that and realize there are times where that is the cost of getting the results I want. So I think it's a great example. And I think a lot of people will relate to that.
And that kind of leads into the next thing we were going to talk about, is when does accountability make sense and when does it not? So I think that that's a really perfect segue for that.
So here's where, as a coach, I get to help people figure that out, is sometimes we live in our own heads and we're not able to really review the facts of our own story. And I tell people all the time, one of my greatest attributes as a coach is to help people break down the game film. Let's actually look at the last month, the last quarter, the last year, and break that down. So in the example I just gave, I think that's really where, before you get into an accountability partner, just having someone who's willing to help you break it down, ask you really good questions, and figure out where has your success waned and what were some of the factors that contributed to that, so you can identify where accountability might be healthy and appropriate. So I think that's it. A lot of it is not being optimistic, but being realistic. Let's look at how you've done so far, and then let's grow from there.
And you said something that I wrote down, facts of own story. So I think sometimes my daughter just recently had committed to working out and doing some things, and she wasn't doing it. And my husband kind of called her out on it and said, "Hey, you aren't doing this." And she said, "Yeah," after they got through like the anger stage, let's call it. But a few days later, she's like, Dad, sometimes you can't see what somebody doesn't tell you. And you're right that now that I've started working out, I feel better and I'm in a better mood and I'm out with you guys more and not in my room as much and things like that, the other pieces of it. So, but sometimes you have to have someone point out things that you weren't seeing. So I think that line, facts of your own story, is really, really important.
Yeah, you can't minimize the value of having someone who cares about you, who's walking outside of your reality, to ask those questions that help you figure it out. And it's delicate. There's got to be a lot of trust when you do that. So, a father-daughter relationship sounds like a really beautiful one for that to exist. Sometimes a marriage partnership can work, but let's shift gears a little and talk about what our audience probably experiences most often, which is a professional relationship. So
Mhm.
let's say you're a sales professional. Oh, great. We have one of the
Mhm.
best right here on the podcast. If you, Kathryn, are in a position in 2024 where you've recognized that you need some professional accountability to get from an aspirational goal and really turn it into one that you're executing on consistently, how do you go about that? What are your steps for identifying a really great professional partnership as an accountability partner?
So for me, I definitely want somebody who's unbiased. So let's say your boss may not be the best accountability partner, and not because they don't care about you, but just because they're going to be biased in that bottom line or that success formula. Someone who's caring, honest, and that they can really call me out on stuff. I've definitely like been too strong for some people where they don't call me out on stuff of, hey, okay, great. Oh, you're doing great. And you just get compliments. Well, that's not really going to help. I need someone who says, hey, you said you were going to do this and you're not doing it. And what's going on? Like, is this really important to you anymore? Or is it that something else is getting in the way? Or what are some other ideas? And I think it's important to have that strong person. I think sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's important. And that's really what builds relationships, is when you can really talk like that to each other.
All right, so let's dig a little deeper. Let's say you figured out that's what's important to you, and you found a person who matches
Mhm.
up with that symbiotic intention that you just described. What are some practical tips? How do you approach that person? What's the step to
Mhm.
get this started from one sales professional to another?
Well, I think if it's two people who are, let's say, coworkers or in a different industry, but in the same kind of motivated track, I think I mean, I've just approached people and said, hey, I would love to create some accountability on some projects, and it looks like you have some projects going on too. What do you think about meeting up once a week and just elevating each other and holding each other accountable for a few things every week? I think to me, that's an easy question. I know it can be a little bit intimidating, but I think it depends on who it is. And the other side of that is hiring a professional coach. That's more of, hey, I'm going to really talk through with the person and see if they're a good fit before I hire them. So it's a little bit different, but kind of the same in that, do some research, make sure the personalities match up, and it's okay to switch too. I mean, if something comes up and you're like, hey, they don't have time for me, they're not calling me back, they're missing the meetings, it's okay to say, you know what, I need a different coach here. That's all right.
Okay, so that kind of gets into maybe the rules of engagement, which
Mm-hmm.
may sound very formal to someone. They may think, "Oh gosh, that's why I don't do this. It seems so formal." Well, keep it simple. A rule of engagement that you just kind of riffed on naturally. Let's call it out. Maybe it's a good idea if you do find that person, whether they are a peer, whether they're in another industry, but they have a similar kind of motivated style, or even a coach. Maybe it's really good in the setting to agree upon a couple of things, not just where will we meet or when will we meet, but how long will we meet? I think setting a deadline on the term that you will
Yeah.
seek that accountability really helps, because it gives you a chance to say, hey, if we do this for 90 days, we're not committing to do this forever. Let's evaluate how effective this was after
Mhm.
90 days and decide, do we want to continue a new version of this going forward? Or did we
Mhm.
get and accomplish what we aimed for? And if we
Mhm.
did, you're right. It's okay to say, thank you. You helped me get from here to here. I really appreciate it. And you don't have to be locked
Yeah.
in forever.
Yep. Yeah, that's very true. And I think like recurring calendar appointments is huge. We have a group that we meet with that's a few peers of mine at our company, and we just have it recurring. And then everybody knows it's on the calendar. Everybody knows how and when and how long, and it makes it a lot easier to get there. So I personally think it's easier. Like I've been in some accountability groups where you just text what you've done once a week, and that for some reason it just leaves my brain. So I have to calendar almost everything in my life in order for it to get done. So I think that's, and everybody will be different with that, but you have to find what works for you.
That's such a great point, because I think, having coached hundreds of people over the last decade, I can tell you that sometimes a text is appropriate and other times it's the easiest way to duck accountability. And so you really
Mhm.
do have to learn not just what works for you, but also what works for the issue or the topic of accountability, because there are some things that require more eye to eye contact. Like, seriously, are you
Yeah.
doing what you said you would do? That's different. And we all know in our heart, maybe in our gut, when we need to step it up. And that goes back to the prior question. It's so important to find that appropriate partner who can match the
Mhm.
level of intensity that you need without being domineering or being too soft. And I know that's a Goldilocks scenario, but it's critical with accountability. All right, so let's switch the
Yeah.
gears on this, Kathryn. You ever had
Mhm.
accountability go wrong? You ever had someone who said the right things, they set it up well, then it just fizzled? It didn't really go.
Yeah.
How have you handled that?
Yeah. So you know this story because for a little bit I had two coaches. And that one of them was kind of the same thing again and again. And he was more of an idea giver than a accountability partner. And so for me, I just kind of had to, well, I wanted to test something out to say, okay, are all coaches this way or is it this just this coach? So I hired another coach. And then once I saw the difference, it was kind of like, oh yeah, like definitely not. So once I figured that out, I just kind of said, hey, this isn't working out for me as much. The effectiveness has gone down for me. I'm going a different avenue and going to do something else. But thank you for your time. Um, and that's how that went. Now it obviously depends on who it is. I mean, if you're an accountability partner with a friend, you've got to be a little bit more gentle. But it's I kind of feel like anything in our life that isn't working, it's okay to just say, you know what, I need to try something else because it's your time, it's your money, even if you're not spending money, it's still money because it's time. So you've got to move on and you've got to do what's best for you and your group. Unless you're the one that's saying, hey, they might be getting a ton out of it and maybe I'm not, but I can see the difference in them and maybe that's okay as long as I realize that and I know that this is volunteer time for me, that I'm now helping them in their accountability, but I'm not getting the same effort back.
Yeah, your response really triggered in my mind a clear phrase that most people will understand. You have to have emotional intelligence. You have to
Mm,
be able to read the other person so that you know whether or not you can be direct with them, or you have to be a little more gentle, whether or not you can
yeah.
course correct it quickly, or whether or not you're going to need to give it a little bit of time. And I think that is where they say in psychology, it's sometimes more art than science. That emotional intelligence is not it's not an easy thing to identify. And so if you work on that, I think it can elevate the experience you get from accountability. If you don't have great emotional intelligence, self-awareness, social awareness, things that are critical in that realm, if we're going to be really great at this, it can make the experience harder because you just don't get it, or maybe don't understand how to help them get it. And even with good intentions, it can go sideways or even south.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And EI is a whole topic we can cover. But yeah, when you're having those difficult conversations, that definitely can be helpful of how am I going to approach that? So
All right, well, we'll make note of that. That's a future episode. So
yeah.
if we want to tie this one down, let's just come to a place where we're giving them some simple direction on either how they would get started if they think they're ready for it. If accountability in 2024 seems like a topic that they're finally ready to do something different, what would be your best practical step for getting that moving in the right direction?
So I think it's identifying what type of accountability partner you need. Are you, are you to the point where you can pay somebody to do that? And if so, then that's great. And then it's kind of finding it, hey, does that look like a peer? If so, who are some good people in my life that could be that for me? And maybe list those out and think through that, and then obviously approach them and get it set up. And you could say, hey, let's try a trial of a few sessions and reconvene and see if this is working for both of us. That's more on the accountability. I think if you're looking to hire a coach, that's probably where you've got some good advice. But from the person on the other end of the coach, I would say that it's just finding that personality that fits along with a company that's got some good reputation. I think there's a ton of coaches out there, so there's going to be somebody out there that's right for you. But I think it's important to dig in a little bit with what they offer too.
That's great. That's great. Well, the only thing I'll add to that, because I do get that perspective of the coach who gets that call from time to time of, can you help me? Is I want to find out very quickly where you are in terms of your personal vision and your plan. If I can see clearly where you're trying to go, and I can see clearly how you're trying to get there, we can move to accountability a lot more quickly, because now we're just in the phase of having a growth mindset. What are we going to try in the weeks or months ahead that's designed to close that gap that you see from that long-term vision to the current reality? How are you closing that? I can help you be an accountability partner once I see clearly what you're trying to do. But if you come to a coach and really the accountability you need is, I need to figure out what my vision is, I need to figure out what my plan is, that's okay. A coach can help you with that too. But I wouldn't jump right to accountability in that case. I would work more, I guess, methodically toward getting that clarity first, because we'll go back to where we started the episode. The danger, and I've seen coaches do this even with good intentions. They mean to ask really good questions. They mean to help guide that person to figure it out. But they have done this before, and they really kind of know, and they jump right into the, Kathryn, look, just do this, or you should do that, or stop doing that. It probably, I'm going to assume positive intent. It probably comes from a good place,
Yeah.
but the result of it isn't as effective, because what you're doing is, maybe subconsciously, you're creating a hierarchy in that accountability relationship that's not natural. And now that person that came to you wanting some help suddenly feels like, well, I'm an idiot. I don't have any of this figured out. Now you're making me feel stupid. And now I don't, this isn't what I wanted. So
Yeah.
I think you have to be really clear on upfront as a coach. Do they have a clear vision and a clear plan? And now you're just joining them on that journey to keep them focused and not distracted. That's where accountability, I think, can be beautiful. So if that's where you are today, definitely seek out someone who can help you on that journey. If you're not there, it's okay. Just make sure you're upfront to say, I need help figuring that out first. And that's a great place
Yeah.
to start.
And I think you can do it accountability doesn't need to be everything, right? So you can do it in little tiny parts of your life really well.
Hmm.
So an example of this is my sister and I texted each other every day, or sent a Marco Polo every day or whatever, saying, hey, this is what I did for my workout. And it was really tiny, but it really elevated both of us. And so it doesn't need to be, hey, I want a whole life plan. And it can be little tiny micro accountability partners that you have a few of them in your life that really help elevate your life. But it doesn't have to be as big of a deal as people make it. So reach out to those around you who care about you. And those can also be accountability partners if it's set up correctly.
You know, Kathryn, we're the Building Bigger Lives podcast, and you just touched on the nugget that'll tie down today's episode. Start small and
Yeah.
keep going. I
Yeah,
love it.
exactly. Exactly. So great. And I just thank you for being one of my accountability partners. You do a great job, and it's always fun to do this with you. So I hope we've had some great takeaways from this, and I hope that people listening will elevate their life by getting an accountability partner in one way, shape, or form. So thank you so much for being here. Any closing thoughts, Michael?
No, I think this was a great topic for this time of year, and it's probably one we could check back on later in the year because, as we know, intentions at this time of year are high. It'd be great to follow up on this one, maybe to be accountable to each other and the audience that we serve. So I look forward to coming back around on this one in a few months down the road.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you on the next podcast.